My name is Joshua, and I am the Tribune. Right now, God is searching the earth, looking for people to hand out His most wonderful and one of His most powerful, beautiful, and exciting strategies for His purpose. Now, He's looking to give this strategy to His children and people who are willing to go through the process with Him to get trained to be able to handle this beautiful strategy that He's willing to hand out. Now, this strategy is He is looking to manifest pieces of heaven through you and through your life and through your purpose onto the earth for people to flock to in order to get to know Him and know that He is the true God of the universe. Now, before we get into this, it's very important that I am clear on the fact that we do not see anything like this right now on the earth, and in our times, nobody has ever done anything like I'm talking about. The reason why we have to remember that we have not seen anything like this is because we need supernatural power that is very unusual in order to do this mighty task for God. God will come to you, for example, and say, I would like you to bring heaven's architecture to the best of your ability onto the earth, take down my blueprints, and manifest through literally building on the earth pieces of heaven's architecture. Now, this sounds wonderful, and maybe people can have faith for this. But the biggest thing to remember when God is going to speak to you on these kind of matters and has this kind of purpose for you is it's not enough just to have faith. Faith is the believing that He will and can do a thing. But in this kind of situation, for this purpose, you need to be able to visualize what God is speaking about to you. You need to be able to see in the Spirit what God is speaking about so that you can start pulling things out of the Spirit and preparing His blueprints for your life and for His purpose so that you can prepare to literally manifest them and bring them to reality on the earth so that people can get a glimpse of what is waiting for them when they accept Jesus Christ as their personal Savior and live in obedience to God throughout their lives for their own purpose. Now, today we're going to be speaking on how to do this, because many people talk about giant tasks, huge missions, big purpose, powerful assignments, but the problem is that they don't tell you how to practically tap into this supernatural power. This is what God's ordered me to do today on this video. Because there is a giant key that if we don't know this key that I'm going to be speaking about today, we will simply just have faith that He can do something, but He can never actually deliver these kind of plans to you. This key is called properly managing our suspension of disbelief. Now, before I go into how to manage this gift that God has given the human race, I must explain what really suspension of disbelief is. Suspension of disbelief, the best way to explain it to you is when you watch a movie, you are able to look at the screen and see this screen is a screen. I cannot walk into it. I cannot reach in and touch something. These people that are acting in this movie are actors. They are not really going through the problems that I'm seeing. They're not really having the adventures that I'm seeing. This is a fantasy. This is something that is not real. And what suspension of disbelief is God has given us the ability to use our imaginations and suspend our disbelief on the situation we are seeing. And we're able to experience the raw emotions that we are watching, even though we know it is not real. And we know certain things that in this movie or in this entertainment, it's impossible for these things to happen, but we still experience the emotion, the thrill, the excitement, and the adventure. So what it is we allow ourselves to get lost in this story. This is what suspension of disbelief is. But it's really important to know that God has given us this gift not just for entertainment, because really entertainment doesn't birth anything for us, for His purpose. God expects us to manage our suspension of disbelief properly by going to Him first Before we use it for anything else, God wants us to seek His face and say, God, what do you have for me that you want me to believe? What do you have for me that you want me to build and prepare that will lead to action steps for myself that I cannot build or prepare or do anything with you unless I can see it? Because the things that God tells us to do, when I'm talking about taking heaven and manifesting it on the earth in literal terms, we must understand that this will look impossible to us. This will look like we cannot do it. The things that God is going to show you that He wants to birth through you onto the earth, that really is slices of His character and His beauty and heaven itself, they are not going to look like anything you've seen before. So what this is going to take is you giving God your suspension of disbelief, because He knows that when you give Him your suspension of disbelief, the things He has for you that you feel like aren't real are very real. They're more real in the spirit than even your flesh. So instead of giving all your suspension of disbelief to something that is actually fake, and you're actually tricking yourself into believing this is real so you can get some kind of thrill or excitement or entertainment for yourself, God has ordered it for us to take that to Him so we can really believe in the things and see and visualize the things that He wants to bring onto the earth. This is very hard to do. This is why we need to give our gift of suspension of disbelief to Him. And non-Christians and people who do not think of God, they are misusing their suspension of disbelief every single day, squandering it on things that will never build God's purpose. Now, the most important thing to understand when we're talking about giving God our suspension of disbelief is these things always translate into action steps. First, it's visualizing. We need to see what God is saying. Then we need to try to pull it out of the spirit and have action steps in the natural that will make these things a reality. Then from there, we need to continue to work with God to go through the process, as He is the only one who knows how to carry these things forth properly. So when God gives you something like this, it's already so impossible that you don't know what to do with it. Even if you can see it and visualize it and put it down on the blueprint with Him, you still are going to need Him to carry forth this plan. But you cannot even get to the blueprint part unless you give Him your suspension of disbelief. Now, I have to talk about two ways that God uses our suspension of disbelief when we give it to Him. The first way is He encourages us, because He will tell you some crazy thing that He wants you to not only believe, but visualize and take it serious and believe that it is real, to encourage you to carry forth His mission and walk through His processes for you. A good example of this is God will show you things in the Spirit. He will speak to you about angels, for example. One time I was so discouraged in my walk with God because I was working extremely hard in certain areas with Him, but it was in private. And what God told me, He said, in the natural, nobody can see what you're doing. But I need you to know that you are famous in the Spirit. You are famous in heaven. Not only do the angels know you, but the demons know you. Now, when God tells you something like that, there's not too much you can do with it other than being encouraged and letting that fill your spirit to give you the vigor and the strength and the power to continue doing God's things in strength. But you cannot have that benefit that He wants unless you give Him your suspension of disbelief in that situation. Because when you give Him the suspension of disbelief, He will actually show you glimpses of what that looks like in the Spirit. You will suddenly look and see in the Spirit and say, wow, I have angels surrounding me like a vortex, protecting me, helping me do God's mission. This is powerful. And that's a whole nother message. We're going to talk about being famous in the Spirit. But this is really meant for encouragement. The second way is he will not just want you to be encouraged by this visual aspect that you believe, that he shows you in the Spirit, but he wants you to pull these things out of the Spirit and put it on a blueprint for your life, for your purpose. These are action steps. This is the second reason why you need to have your suspension of disbelief managed with God. Now, I must tell you that the suspension of disbelief that he has allotted you has limits. You have a tank full each day, each year, each season. So what happens is it's not unlimited. You have a limited amount of suspension of disbelief from God. So it's important for me to explain that you cannot waste the suspension of disbelief that God has gifted you with for your purpose. The enemy has put into place so many distractions to get us to waste our suspension of disbelief on things that will not profit God's purpose. And he knows that if he shows you enough movies, or he entertains you, or he distracts you with all this other stuff that he wants you to imagine and believe, you cannot go to God and hear what his blueprints are for your life. Because suspension of disbelief is costly. It costs you energy. Have you ever watched a movie or been involved in some kind of entertainment and you finish this form of entertainment and you are exhausted? You are ready to go to sleep. You can't think of doing any work. You can't think of doing anything, and you are just ready to go down. Well, this is why. It's because you were operating in a gift that God has given you, which is suspension of disbelief. But when you don't use it how God has allotted it for, with what he had in mind for you, instead of getting power to do mighty works on the earth with God, you are exhausted. Now, I'm not saying that entertainment cannot build you up and feed you and inspire you to do powerful things with God. That's not true. That's a whole nother side. But I'm talking about if you don't properly manage it with God, your suspension of disbelief, then you cannot do God's will. So what God will do is he will come to you and say, I expect you to come to me before you waste your suspension of disbelief. Come to me first and ask me, do you have a specific thing that you want me to visualize with you in the Spirit for your purposes? Before I watch a movie, before I do anything with my imagination, I'm going to check in with God first. After that, he will tell you exactly what he's allotted your suspension of disbelief for. Now, the beauty about God is he has the perfect strategy for you. He knows that I have about 80% of this suspension of disbelief that I've put inside of this person, and that 80% today is focused on my purpose. That's what I need, and that's what needs to be done, and that's how they're going to be most fulfilled. But the 20% that's left, I have for their entertainment, because God also does want you to be filled up and have fun and imagine things and be inspired by things like entertainment. And as you know, entertainment is a huge part of what God's called me to manage on the earth. But even though I'm an entertainer, I still am very aware that people should not waste their suspension of disbelief. So God knows exactly how much suspension of disbelief you need for your purpose and to be filled up. And he expects you to check in with him. This is why it's important not to do anything, even that you enjoy, without checking in with him. Because there's certain gifts in the Spirit that you do not want to waste. Now, what are the results of this principle? We always have to talk about the results and the benefits and the treasure, because this is not an easy thing to manage. It takes discipline. And most people do not have this kind of discipline. They do whatever they want and whatever that they think will please them the most. And they do not check in with God. The results of this principle is when you give God your suspension of disbelief, he will manage it for you and you will be building impossible wonders with him. Now, you have to remember that this has never been seen by our times. This is the most powerful thing. He will give you pieces of himself and pieces of heaven that people have not tapped into. And I must say that these things that he will give you are tailored to you. They're tailored to your personality. They're tailored to your mission with God. They are tailored to your purpose. There is nothing more fulfilling than giving God your suspension of disbelief. Because what happens is you become a part of the movie that you love so much. You become a part of the entertainment. When you are using suspension of disbelief without God, you can only be a spectator. But when you give this gift to God and you give this back to him, he takes it and says, now I'm going to do with you what you wish you could do through your life. And these are things you don't even know. These are things you can't even tap into without him telling you, because he knows what your deepest desires are. And he will make you your own character in your own movie, and you will be living out these things. You will not just be a spectator. This is the power of giving God your suspension of disbelief. Now, there is an extra benefit that I must say. You get to know God's character through this. You get to be God's friend through this process. Because what he does is he takes you through not only himself and how he thinks, he teaches you that, but he also takes you through heaven. He gives you glimpses of things that you couldn't imagine. He gives you glimpses and lets you study what you're supposed to manifest with him on the earth. This happens in the spirit. And the better you get at giving God your suspension of disbelief, the more clear these things become in the spirit to you. And then you are taking them down and incorporating them into what his mission is for your life. And over time, you become addicted to checking in with God about what he wants you to manifest and pull out of heaven and bring onto the earth so that people can be attracted to it and maybe get to know God. You are giving people a chance to see what is waiting for them in Christ Jesus. This is the mission. Now, these things are very difficult. It takes practice. You must practice daily on these things. So I want to challenge you, before you go and watch a movie without just thinking about it, before you go watch your favorite TV show, before you visit that theme park, before you even listen to music, check in with God and see if he wants to show you the highest version of that thing for you, that he wants to partner with you on in your life and build. Now, I would like to say that very few people will actually tap into this, but I hope I'm wrong, because this takes mighty faith and giant steps with God. So you need to practice this. You need to dive into this principle, and God will prove himself to you. If you give him your suspension of disbelief, even one time, you will see what he does with it, and you will want it more and more. So many people think, oh, I can't learn anything about, entertainment. I can't do anything without just watching movies all day and studying all these other people. You need to study heaven. This is what you need to study. And if God tells you to study something on earth, to build something that you're going to build with God, then do it. But many times that stuff is banal. He wants you taking things from heaven. And this is what it means to take heaven and manifest it on the earth. And this is the only way to do it. God has it booby-trapped. This is the key to truly building God's wonders. Hail Jehovah.